and Assalamu alaikum. Today at the Career Talks, we have the pleasure of having yet another dynamic lawyer with us. In view of her academic background, she's a graduate from University of London and later went on pursuing her LLM, that is Masters in Law, in Corporate Finance Law from University of Westminster, UK. With nearly over 25 years of distinguished legal experience in capital markets, financial services, and the development sector, she's a dual qualified both in the UK and Pakistan, handling multi-jurisdictional transactions. Her expertise vary widely pan out in handling debt capital markets, private equity, Sharia-compliant structured finance, and cross-border legal frameworks. Time and again, she has proven her prolific leadership in corporate governance, regulatory compliance, and strategic legal advisory with investment banks, brokerage houses, and development of financial institutions. With immense pleasure, please welcome the Group Head Legal and Corporate Affairs, Ms. Sara Anjum at Career Talks. Assalamu alaikum, Sara.
Walaikum assalam.
Thank you so much for taking our time. And it's always a pleasure to have legal experts and legal maestros, I would say, from the market who would just give a bit of a clarity, much needed clarity to the generation next. Students, because it's going to range to, the audience will range from current undergraduate students to young professionals. So your voice and your expertise, your insights, your advices and suggestions will mean the world to them. So thank you so much for taking out, your very, very precious time and giving it to us. I'll take you back in your days, Sara, a little.
Right.
And we'll keep it simple. How did law actually happen? Was it ingrained in you and your personality? Was it coming from the family? Was it coming from some external influence? Because I remember back in those days, law wasn't a much more famed field.
Sure.
A lot of students used to be, and there was a pressure coming from the families to either go towards medical or to go towards engineering. I mean, if you are not an engineer or a doctor, then you're not good enough.
Then
right?
God help you.
Yeah, then God help you. So
Right.
please take us a little deeper into your past.
Actually, it always starts at home.
Yeah.
So thankfully, I came from a family where the biggest gift that was given to a child was good education.
Yes.
Right? And also from a family where there was never a bar to what a woman can achieve or a girl can achieve. So that confidence, I think, I carry with me to
Right.
date. Law happened as a process of elimination because I was just trying not to study math.
Oh my God.
so,
yes,
so
I
that
can
kind of
understand.
made my options limited.
Right.
And then when we were going out, there were also these sitcoms. We had Ally McBeal, we had
Yes,
Boston Legal,
Boston
and
Legal, oh yes.
and all these sitcoms made lawyers sound
Oh, yes,
quite
yes,
interesting and
fascinating,
quite
yes,
clever.
yes.
So that was there. I think what really got me into law was law school. I was really sold. I was because you see, the study of law is not in isolation. It's a reflection of the societal values, about the culture, about the country where the laws are being formulated. And there was so much to be learned, like just trials like Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton impeachment case, or Martha Stewart's insider trading, or now the Enron scandal.
Right.
And it's again in the news, the O.J. Simpson trial. And you get to learn so much about these things in such great detail, right? And it's current and it's relevant. And the debate that comes out of this litigation then feeds into public policy also. So it's very real. And mind you, the study of law is very interesting.
So it all happened, the fascination or the interest happened once you stepped into your undergraduation? What prior to that, when you
I think
graduated from A level?
prior to that, it was like arts, liberal arts was my
Okay, liberal
options,
arts
and then
was
you
the
know
option,
one of
okay.
them was law, and I was like, yes. So these sitcoms make these kids
Okay.
look very clever. Let's try
Right,
this.
right.
Professional seriousness for law and as a professional, that came in law school.
Okay.
And luckily enough, I think the way law is taught abroad, or I think most subjects are taught abroad, is that they make you understand the practicalities of the subject. They give you more exposure. They let you grow. They let you develop. So, for instance, we were made to study the Enron case in detail, right?
Yes.
It wasn't like, okay, this is the question, this is the answer, you just stick to this answer. If you get it right in the exam, you'll do well.
Right.
It was about personal development also.
Yes, yes.
That's important, I think. A wholesome educational experience is very important.
So take us right after your undergraduate or during your undergraduation years and after that. How life actually changed once you got that degree in your hands? Did you immediately came back? Did you pursued your education or a career there, or LLM started right after, or did you go for a gap year?
After my graduation, I worked in London for a bit with a law firm over there. That was very good training because they do. In Pakistan, they throw you in the deep sea. I don't know if that's the case now or not. So there's a little caveat there. But like you need to learn yourself.
Yes.
There, it's a very structured program to teach lawyers how to draft, what the procedures are, whatever. So it's an easier learning process for sure.
Yes.
Then I came back to Pakistan. I worked in a law firm, and I absolutely highly recommend the first couple of years in a law firm experience, so that you get to experience the variety before deciding what's for you.
Right.
But I realized very early on that litigation wasn't for me. Right? For me, in order to advise a client, I wanted to be a business partner. And for me to be a business partner, I wanted to get the pulse of the business.
Yes. Yes.
So you need to be with one company, understand what their motivations are, what their risk appetite is, what their future direction is, what their strategy is, what their goals are, to be able to then find the right yes for them. Because a lot of time people perceive lawyers to be the people who say no. This is not possible, this is illegal, you can't do this. I think the right way to approach it is finding the right yes, right? Tailoring the risk, not to be risk averse, but to create a certain level of tolerance and a buffer around the risks that a company has to naturally take.
A lot of students might be having, all ears towards you. When you said litigation, I realized litigation wasn't me.
Yeah.
Why did you, were resisting litigation then?
I wasn't resisting litigation. I've done it in the start a little bit, but I felt like the environment, the law firm, the courtroom environment is very secure. Everyone's a lawyer. The judge is a lawyer.
Right.
Both the parties are lawyers. They're all well versed with the law, and the application or the implications of what happens there are what happens to the other parties, like the businesses and the plaintiffs and your defendants, and what they're going to do, walk away with an order and do what with it, right?
Yes, certainly.
So that's where law in action, like the intersection of law and business, that's what fascinated me.
Yes.
More.
So basically, the eventual outcome and the result of those judgments, where it goes, you wanted to be on that side.
Also there's there's a heartbeat to business, right? There are boardroom talks that feed into your strategy, right? There are negotiations.
Yes, it's multi-layered.
There's settlements that take place outside the courtroom.
Yes.
Which are very much within the ambit of the law, but there's beyond the law also.
No,
there's
but it's
beyond it's law and business.
And very well put, because girls listening to you, and that is going to be one of our primary emphasis in this discourse also, that women moving and, the numbers of women taking up law and stepping into the field is increasing by every passing year.
Yes.
And these are now taking up very prominent positions in the bar councils also.
Yes.
And yet at the same time, there is inclination towards the corporate side and the in-house side. Do you see that, we still have a longer way to go when it comes to women making it to law and in the field of litigation? Are we, or are we creating a space?
This is a generational shift. I tell you that I started my career when women were just entering the marketplace.
Yes.
And can I just say the story is very different today. When we started off working, and there were a bunch of very ambitious and career-driven women around me, the myth that was there was that they are just passing time until they get married.
Yes, certainly.
So before you even prove yourself professionally, you're debunking that myth.
Yes, yes.
Okay, then you get married because as you do. Then there's the whole set of judgment. Why, if she's career oriented, then she must be ignoring the home or the kids or whatever.
Yeah.
And all these people have no stake in your life, right? They have nothing to do with you, the real you. But what it does, though, is you end up internalizing all of this and doing more, acting, being more, like proving more.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Until you one day breathe and say, look, I'm not perfect, but I need to be whole.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's the advice I give to the girls. We've done that for you. We've proved now girls are there. They've been in leadership positions. It's proved now that there is value to having a woman in leadership position. The results prove enough. We're there now. We're at the table. Now the world needs to adjust.
Right.
Right. So whether it's litigation, it's in-house, it's any field. What we need to understand is leadership is not gender-based. It's competence-based, right? And equality is a right.
Yes,
It's not a favor anymore. And luckily, these girls are proving me right more and more often. And whenever I hire a team, I see girls give me so much more, commitment, and they're so much more driven. It's wonderful to watch.
Yes, yes. No, it's they are now not scarred anymore.
No, they aren't.
Even of the stigmas and the taboos.
Yes,
they're not.
They're not.
They are very. They have got a resilience which is very hard to break at this point.
Yes.
So very, very. I think very rightly put. When I was researching a bit about your career trajectory, the flow of your professional journey, I noticed that you have worked with a lot of corporate organizations. You have worked with MetLife, you've worked with Microfinance Bank in that capacity as a lawyer. How do you, or how does the audience of today understand the sharp difference between law in practice and then the in-house, as an in-house counsel? What is the variation? And does it vary from then again, company to company? Does that experience vary? And it is all about the employer and not about the area of law?
Look, it always varies from company to company.
So how do you find your footing?
It always varies from company to company. It also varies from client to client if you're in private practice. So that's there. You're a support function, and you're here to support your client.
Yes.
Now, whether you are doing that in private practice or you're doing it in-house, the need of your client has to be the most important thing. And then you have to find ways of balancing that within it to make sure that the business is run with integrity and the right ethics. So yes, that's a balancing act. The balance has to be more in-house because I can be an external lawyer, give an opinion on the letter of the law, right? And my client walks away with it. But if you're in-house, then the implications of the choices you make, you're also answerable to a board of directors. You're also answerable to your top management. So the accountability is perhaps more in-house than it is in private practice.
Okay, yes. Very, very rightly put. I think this is something that, a lot of students need to understand, because when they look at a cushion, when they look at a bounce back, when they look at a fallback, okay, fine, if litigation doesn't work for me, I might go on the other side. But the other side actually is still, a bit sophisticated, and yet might be, sort of ingrained with more accountability, like you mentioned, as opposed to the other side, So the transparency element is way more when it comes to the corporate side as opposed to the other.
Yes, I think it's also about what you cut out for, and I always say
Yes,
this.
yes, certainly.
I would like to put the caveat here that women should not shy away from litigation. Look,
Yes.
we've things like harassment
Yeah,
and
certainly,
whatever.
certainly.
We need to now move beyond that. We need
Yes.
to call that out, and we do not let that
Yes.
come as an impediment in our progress.
Yes, yes.
No way. And litigation, if that's what you're good at, then it's not a gendered position. You can be a great litigation lawyer and be a woman.
Has your leadership approach evolved with every employer that you met over the years?
Yes, of
And
course.
how?
Look, you learn from everybody. You learn from your environment. You learn from the different kind of businesses that operate within the company that you work for, the jurisdictions that they operate in,
Yes.
and so the level of compliance, the legal requirements, the business ethics
Yes.
are vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So you do learn a lot. Like for example, in London, there's precision, there's structure. I worked in the UAE. It's a lot about networking and
Yes.
people skills.
Yes.
But you know what Pakistan has taught me? It's taught me how to be resilient and resourceful, and that's very important to see. You make the most of what you have, and that's a skill. Um, every business has a different risk appetite. Every business is at a different stage. Some are in growth stage, some are in mature stage. For some it is all about reputations.
Yeah.
For some it's about growth. For some businessmen, it's about the legacy that they leave behind. So it's about listening to the business partners and then aligning your strategy into the business needs.
So we have seen a lot of variation and diversity in your career also,
Yeah.
moving from sector to sector,
Yes.
I would now like to know how Z2C actually happened back in, I think, 2023. Yes,
Yes.
2023. And was it a conscious move?
I moved
To-
back from Dubai, and
And-
out of the options that I was given, Z2C was very interesting. I
Okay.
spoke, I think, to Rehan Merchant, who's the
Yes.
founder,
Yes.
and I felt like, you have to have that learning curve as well.
Yes.
And there was that. I mean, I haven't worked in the media industry.
Yes.
It's a very different sector from banking
Yes.
or insurance
Certainly.
or
Oh, yes.
brokerage.
Oh, yes.
And it has its own set of challenges. So there's a lot of learning involved also, which I enjoy.
Right.
The good thing is that my group always looks to pioneer in different areas and to be responsible and to show people the
Yeah.
way. And so it's very exciting to be a part of that kind of journey also.
And being a group head legal, holding that kind of very, I think, prominent position, in the organization, and then also handling corporate matters. A lot of students might be very fascinated to know how a general day looks like. How do you balance legal strategy with corporate governance? How do they go hand in hand?
Okay, so a normal day is just fighting battles that are placed on your table in that particular day, whether it is working on an arbitration or helping set up a new business unit, or just giving support to an already healthy unit in terms of contract management and support or policy making. So it is whatever is required to be done. One does it. And
Right.
the largest strategy is always aligned with the business strategy. So wherever the business is looking to go,
Yeah.
that's where the bigger picture is.
Right. When it comes to you talking about these, different defining moments, right, in the career, is there any one in particular that actually influenced your leadership style or legal philosophy, I would say? Anything that you would like to share, that became the sort of a turning point or the defining moment
Look,
in your journey?
I will say that it's a process of evolving.
Okay.
It's always gradual.
Gradual.
It's not really that one thing that hits you and you're like, okay, this is now changing who I am. But there's a lot of mentors along the way, a lot of very understanding men, a lot of very strong women, and they don't have to be professionals. It can be in the form of a mother saying, you're good enough, or in the form of a male boss saying, yes, you need to go pick up your child, it's okay. you know. So small things like that, and that makes you develop that kind of empathy for then when you become yourself in that role. You're like, look, there were people who helped me along the way, and I need to do the same, pay back, you know, in the and. So that's there, and I've learned from some very very thorough professionals, seniors within my field, you know, visionary businessmen. So yeah, it's been a great ride.
So when it comes to now speaking of your very cross-functional and multi-jurisdictional, you know, sort of transactions that you have handled, the Sharia compliant framework that you were a part of. Take us through any particular challenge or students stepping into that area of law. What should they be aware of? Which kind of challenges did you face? And how did you overcome them? And what were the opportunities like in those areas?
I think the most important thing that changed my life was when I started seeing myself as a business partner as opposed to seeing myself as a lawyer.
Okay.
So when you become an enabler, that changes the dynamics. Then you're valued as such as well.
Yeah.
So for anyone who goes out with a law degree, we are risk averse, right? So it's also important to, I think, what in any negotiation, in any business transaction, listening is such a skill,
Oh, yes.
right? Once you listen and understand,
Very
you give the
important.
right opinion and you give the right advice. So I think that's something that we need to breathe and listen first before answering.
Sarah, anybody who's interested towards the corporate side, and as a student of first year, second year, studying their undergraduate, what kind of skills should they sharpen up from a very young stage in their academic?
Soft skills, presentation skills. I'm telling you, there's no shortcut to Excel. Lawyers don't work on Excel. There's no running away from it. So learn. Learn how to present your work.
Right.
Learn how to make your point of view understood.
Yes.
In a positive
And
way.
any advice that you would give as to how to do it? I mean, what to put into practice? What can be the possible tools if they want to, you know, brush up on those skills? And because again, communication is a challenge, is an impediment in the way. Particularly that, you know, when the fascination comes towards, oh, miss, because it sounds so glamorous. The Harvey Specter life of a corporate lawyer sounds so fascinating and glamorous that all they want to get in is the corporate side, right?
Yes.
And I've seen that, you know, happening very actively over the past few years. But what happens in that side, or how to reach the top of your game in that area of law? What are the tools that you would recommend?
You need to be on top of your research, right? So there is no shortcut to homework. You need to be well versed with the topic. You need to have worked hard on it. There's no chat GPTing and finding the answers. You know how many times I've got the wrong citation on chat GPT?
Really?
Or that it doesn't even exist and chat GPT has made it up. So, I mean, do your research, go through the books, go through your citations, study the law, understand if you're asking for corporate, understand the business requirement, understand the structuring, look at the different risks and the different options. And when you're confident in what you're doing, then be confident and then, you know, stand up there and take the credit for what you've done.
That takes me to my next question. Like, you know, and thank you for mentioning it, because right today in the morning, we were told to integrate AI as much as possible.
Yes.
You know, because that is apparently the future, and we can't be running away from it. We can't be scared of it. We shouldn't resist it, because obviously it's going to take over our lives, and probably you and me might become redundant. That's how that's how everybody is looking at the world, right? Then what should the students now abstain from AI tools or take support? How do you look at the technological advancements?
So I think it's a support tool for sure. You should take away the mundane tasks like cover letters and, you know, just if you want someone to check spell check or grammar or even structuring of your work, whatever. But the thought and the research cannot be taken away, right? There is a lot of soul that goes into drafting.
Yes.
It's something people don't realize, right? there are a lot of variables that have to come together for you to put
Yes, oh
something
yes, oh
together. There's
yes.
a lot of different variables that come together on a negotiation table. Right? It's never, okay, there's an argument on a clause. It's not just the clause, it's always that something behind that clause is a reputational risk. There's sometimes egos are involved. Sometimes it's about visibility. So you need to understand what's behind the negotiation.
So
So
AI,
everyone can walk away with dignity.
yes,
But
yes.
AI has its limitations. It can take away the mundane tasks, but please don't rely on it entirely. Do your research, cross check.
So there's no running away from research,
No, none,
and
unfortunately.
there has to be a certain level of intellectual engagement and involvement, particularly when it comes to drafting.
Yes, absolutely. Even when it comes to litigation, I mean, even if it's case law research, whatever, do cross check.
So if an intern comes to you, right, and you ask them to draft something, you have got certain tools in Z2C which are
yes.
going to identify that this was an AI extracted content.
I can tell from a distance. I will tell you that the AI drafts are so impersonal.
They don't have the human touch.
They don't have the human touch, they don't have the
Yeah.
you touch.
Yes,
When a
you touch,
person
yes.
comes to you and has a draft that they've made, even if it's not flawless, it says a lot about that person. Any letter, like for instance, even if you write a letter
Yeah.
to somebody, or you write a text message to somebody, it has more you in it than just the words, right? And I think we're missing out a little bit on that. I might be old fashioned, but I do think that
No, I think
that
I
effort
agree.
needs to be put in.
Yes, I agree. I agree, certainly, because now the reliance has come to that extent that even in most of the cases, they are getting their work assignments done through ChatGPT. And it
it's
is,
funny, right?
yes.
Because there was a time that you were doing research in library, and then there was this CD that would say, okay, this is plagiarized, you didn't quote the person
You
whose
didn't
work
cite it well, yes.
you didn't cite it properly.
Yes, yes.
And now we have this all sort of allied plagiarism tool called ChatGPT, which is obviously picking up information from somewhere. It's not
yes.
coming up with
Yes,
it itself.
yes, certainly. And you now have a legal Chat GPT and
Yes.
AI tools also,
Yes.
which are fed the right kind of legal case laws. And this constitution, there's a complete, archive, legal archive that is stored in it, and then it extracts from it and gives you it constructs everything for you, apparently.
So it's like I said, it's supposed to aid what you're doing.
Yes.
Before, when we
Certainly.
started off, you had to sit in the library or wo PLDA, and usme se you take out citations and you go through the whole thing and you underline and you bookmark it, and then you had the Pakistan law site and the Nexus and all of that, and that did your research for you. As long as you're the one in control, and you're also learning something. The problem is that you mindlessly put on a task and give your prompts, and something comes out. Now,
Yeah.
you don't review it.
Yeah.
You're like, it looks okay, there's a structure to it.
Yes.
Let's just send it out.
Sounds
there's
fine.
a danger in that
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
You know?
So human element and personal, and I personally feel, Asara, I think above everything else, I think it actually rusts your potential
Oh, yes, so much.
and your creativity and your intellectual enzymes and germs. I think your neurons start to get rusted to a huge extent.
I agree.
Because this is made to work,
Yes.
and now we have a substitute that, is just putting a closure to everything that we could intellectually be, ingrained in.
Yes.
So that is, something that requires more attention than anything else. I was very fascinated to ask you because particularly the girls listening to you might be very, captivated with your personality. If you have to create like a blueprint of, let's say, women lawyers leading towards change, what would be your core principles that you will set?
Don't shrink to fit in. Be yourself. Always do the right thing. It will not win you a lot of fans, but it will get you something so much deeper, which is inner peace and integrity, not to be compromised on. And work hard. You deserve to be in the room just as much as anybody else.
Any women leaders, inspirational personalities that you followed, that made a change in your life, that you wanted to be like? Any story?
God, there were so many. Justice Nasra Javed Iqbal, like she was an amazing lawyer, but she had so much empathy and she was so feminine at the same time. She didn't feel the need to become a man, you know, to fight in a man's world. She kept her feminine side there also, and that brought so much to the table. There was Asma Jahangir. I mean, there were so many amazing lawyers. You can just keep going on and.
Yeah.
So we've been very lucky in Pakistan that we do have that leadership by women
Yes.
to look up to.
Yes. Talking about very, I would say, cutthroat corporate atmosphere that requires regulatory and organizational change. How would somebody keep up in times of uncertainty, even? How would you keep up with the adaptability and resilience in those times when you're dealing and you're facing, kind of like handling that charge in an organization?
You have to be agile, you have to be flexible, you have to be in the constant learning mode, you have to be receptive to change, you have to be well researched. In an environment like Pakistan where the laws are volatile, like I said, you need to be resilient and you need to be resourceful.
And sitting there, Sarah, handling an umbrella, handling a cohort of people, right? How would you, what is your strategy giving out to your team? What do you coach them on? What is your teamship philosophy?
My teamship philosophy is just that you're part of a team, right? I never ever feel like I know more than them, right? And when I sit there and ask them their opinion and acknowledge when they're right or acknowledge when they've gone that extra mile, the kind of work that comes my way and the kind of response I get, it's truly thrilling, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to encourage our juniors more. We shouldn't feel like we need to give them the drill. If they are competent, if they're good, then we need to nurture that. And that's my leadership skill, and that gives me the best results. Like,
what will be, and I believe students and young professionals might be very interested to know that what is the recruitment process or the screening process if they want to join the legal division in places like Z2C, or if you would assess them, what would be those indicators and traits that you would be looking into, or areas of competence that you would be looking into?
I think the passion for the subject,
right?
Like you get, and that comes across. You can tell that somebody is actually interested in what they're doing. That you can tell in a 5 minutes conversation. That's important. Also, I think exposure to the law firm, like I said, there's no shortcut.
Okay.
So 3 to 4 years of understanding procedural law, of having worked in a law firm, dabbled with different areas of law is very important. That I look for. And I think confidence.
So passion, confidence, and a bit of an experience.
Yes.
Now, if somebody does not want to step into a law firm
At all.
wants to just has focus that I'm going to go into the in-house side only, and there are girls and boys like that. Do they have a bleaker chance of being getting the opportunity as opposed to those with an experience?
I think there are a lot of variation in the law also. So there's compliance where you don't need to have any exposure to a law firm at all. There's regulatory affairs or corporate affairs or corporate governance where exposure to law, litigation, law firm is maybe not that important. So you have to find your niche. There's always, as long as you're good at what you do and you believe in what you do and you have a clear path ahead of you chalked out in your head, and there should be some flexibility in that, of course, but if you know what you want, then there's always room for you. In-house is not just only, I'm not just managing negotiations and settlements and arbitrations. There's a lot of governance and structuring where exposure to law firm may not be that important. Other skills might be required.
Right, and I think that's why I keep on saying that our law students are exposed to a very very enriched and yet at the same time very opportunistic era.
Yes.
Where their entity as lawyers is required in so many sectors, irrespective of whether they have a certain level of, bespoke experience in a particular sector, or not.
Yeah.
As long as you have got the legal acumen, I would say, you would be required in a particular field that might not be best suited with your field, but your requirement of your intellect will be there.
Public policy,
Public
that's one
policy,
of them.
yes,
It's very
public
interesting.
policy,
It's
yes,
also very
yes. So
inspiring.
now, slowly and gradually, non-orthodoxical, non-conventional pathways are opening up. And thanks to people like you, that the students are getting slightly more courageous towards stepping into it, right? And they're straying away from the conventional pathways. Working in multi-jurisdictional atmospheres, how are the legal frameworks different when it comes to UK, UAE, and Pakistan in particular? And what to keep in mind, and how to keep on, kind of like sort of molding yourself throughout this journey?
I think if you're looking at any jurisdiction in isolation, it's easier. So, like I said, with UK, there's structure. There's a lot of reliance on law, and there's a lot of people want to be compliant. That's the mindset. UAE, it is more forced. I mean, there's a lot of rigidity, but they know how to get the law enforced.
Right.
And like I said, they're very much into networking and whatever. Pakistan's a little fluid. It's got it's varied. There's some very well-defined laws. There's some areas which are evolving. There's some resistance to being compliant. It's easy when you're working in one jurisdiction in isolation. I think what is the challenge and more interesting is when you have to reconcile different jurisdictions, so that when your entity has exposure to 3 or 4 different jurisdictions, whether it's a US entity that you're partnering with in Pakistan and they have their Foreign Corrupt Practices Acts, where they're very averse to bribery and unethical practices, and they want to make sure that they're not sued abroad because of your business practices, things like that.
Right.
So I think finding a middle ground between jurisdictions is more interesting.
And when it comes to while working in microfinance sites, development sites, capital markets, how do you look at financial inclusivity and bringing in legal innovation while keeping the financial inclusivity in consideration?
As far as inclusivity is concerned, let me just tell you a very interesting fact.
Yes.
In microfinance, the best loan repayment comes from women. Do you know that they do not default on their
Oh my
loans?
goodness, really?
Yes. They are.
And this is statistics?
These are statistics. They always make sure that they pay back their loan. They are in second, third cycles of loans. I know women who bought one sewing machine and then set up a unit after loan cycle after loan cycle. So, I mean, women are definitely more structured. So we're there. I think
legal innovation, yeah.
And so when the loan size is smaller, obviously your client is a risky client. They don't have a collateral. These are unsecured lending.
Yes, unsecured, yes.
Okay. So a lot of times you just have to, there's a lot of training and development that goes there also. So when you, with microfinance banks, what's very important is when we give someone loans, then we also equip them with how to run a business. So those kind of workshops go on. And just keeping a check, so compliance is more active, keeping a check that the loans is healthy, the business is doing okay. These things are more important because these people don't have collaterals. Crop cycles, for example, those are bullet loans. They happen during harvesting season. There's one loan.
Yes.
And so the repayments. But these are communities, right? For them to be respectable in their communities is also a driving force in repaying their loans. This is how we are, right?
Yes.
The middle classes or the
Yes.
low middle classes.
Yes.
We want to have that integrity.
Yes.
So that's there. Bigger businesses default all the time. They don't care as much as an individual who's got a small business would care about his brand value.
And the fact that you do have that appetite of might be taking support of a financial institution or some microfinancing support.
Yes.
If you do have that appetite, or you have identified that appetite as a client, then you will be obviously sort of in a way accountable also.
And I went into
Towards-
microfinance in London, interestingly enough,
Yeah.
because we were looking at alternative investments because there was a recession in the market.
Oh,
So
yes.
alternative investments, high risk, high return, because there were repayments were so good, as opposed to the bigger loans and the
Oh.
bigger rewards, but then
Yes,
them
yes.
not falling through.
Right.
So it was to have a diversified portfolio as an alternative asset class. Microfinance was something that gained a lot of interest back in the day when a lot of investment banks were shutting down or becoming commercial banks.
So, in order to create that kind of some sort of a diverse portfolio,
Yes.
or in order to kind of like just divide your risk, if you're risk averse in nature, then you should opt for these options.
Yes. Yes.
And they do have a ratio where you see a lot of repayments happening
Yes.
in full swing. And
Yes.
particularly in Pakistan, you said
Yes.
women.
Yes.
Women were considered to be very, integral in their role. Having senior leadership positions in an industry which is predominantly male-centric.
Still is. Yes.
Yeah. What embargoes, what barriers came your way, or did they come? Did they not? Did you face anything? And how did you overcome? How did you look at the market back in those days?
I think I come from a generation of very resilient women. The women who gained any professional success at our times, they were very resilient, and they shut the outside noise, and they were just focusing on doing what they do well and doing it better than anybody else. So there was that pressure. Like I said, you had to debunk myths like you're working till you get married. You're going to slow down because you got married. You can't work late hours because your husband might have a problem with it. But those voices, they don't have a stake in your life. And they are not part of your failures and they're not part of your success. You own your life, the story of your life. And I think direction is very important. And like I said, that early on confidence that you get from the home, that even if you're a girl, you can achieve anything.
Yeah.
That you really do carry all your life.
That's all that's required.
That is all that's required. That when there's no barriers, that or genderized roles, that this is what boys study and this is what girls do, and you're given that confidence, that then you don't need external you don't need anyone else to tell you that you're good enough.
Certainly, I completely agree. That kind of that support system makes you do wonders.
Yes.
Because you can fall back on it
Yes.
at any time. But if you don't have that, then you are a warrior on loose, I believe.
Yes, then there's a lot of
But
resentment, and I've
yes,
seen in
yes.
girls who had to.
And it does impact your work, and it
im-
shows.
It impacts your work. It impacts your mental health.
Yes.
And so the only people you need to check up on are the people who are important to your life. So like I said, if you're a happy person, if you're a fulfilled person, you'll bring the positive energy into your home. You will build that confidence in your children. So being whole, there's nothing wrong with being whole, like being a person who also has their own ambitions outside of what my children should achieve or what, how I can support my husband. That's important. But your personal development, and if you're happy, you're going to do those things better. I do think so.
Yeah. But then not everybody has that, right? And then there are women, very competent girls, thinking of a pathway towards, crawling towards a pathway in corporate and in-house. Is the world, and this is what my next question will be, speaking of women in particular, one, do you think it's going to be, if they're not settled, if there is not enough support from the family towards pursuing law, but they still want to get towards the cleaner and the much more sophisticated side of corporate and in-house, is the world of in-house and corporate is still very cutthroat and daunting for them to make a pathway for themselves? One. And secondly, speaking of general counsel, in a world of ESG and data privacy and AI like we spoke of, how are you looking at the world of general counsel in the next 5 to 10 years?
The first question?
Yeah.
What if you don't have that kind of support and you still want to make it in the law field while it's still cutthroat?
Yes, yes.
I think that change comes from people like you and me,
Yeah,
right? We need to encourage these
Yes,
girls. We know
yes.
what their challenges are. We've been
Certainly.
there. And the change has to come from us.
Yes.
Like we have to be more inclusive. We have to be more understanding because some of these resources you don't want to lose. They're
Yes. Oh,
excellent workers.
Oh, yes.
And if you just take away a bit of their stress, if you just tell them, hey, I can hear you, I understand you, how can I make this work for you?
Yeah, certainly.
It really changes the dynamic. So that's very important.
Right.
The role of general counsel is only growing. Okay? Because now it's not just purely can you vet the agreement and can you please give me an update on where the case is in the court. It is more strategic. It's more part of the management. It's more about what's the next direction, how do I achieve it. So it's very business integrated. And it's more exciting than ever to be part of an in-house team, yes.
So when it comes to businesses, particularly when it comes to the ambit of compliance and legal trends, how the businesses of today in Pakistan should perceive it, should be prepared for, in a way.
They should see them as their friends. I think every business needs to have an advisor.
Yeah.
If you're a smaller business and you don't have a full-time advisor, but you put that in, it will help you manage the long term better. So, these boring functions like audit and legal and compliance and all of these that we associate ourselves with, they're absolutely critical to the health of an organization. And I think now businesses are beginning to understand that, so it's a happier time for everybody.
Yes, certainly. Sarah, you used a term, enabler, right? Business enabler. Now, how can we shift and how can the world of legal actually shift from, particularly a legal counsel's role, from just being mere risk managers to looking at themselves as business enablers? How do they kind of shift that perspective? What additions should they inculcate in their general practice throughout the day that changes that perspective, which is very important, to have that kind of approach?
So it's from becoming a risk manager, right? To someone who avoids risk, to someone who manages it. For example, you cannot have a business with no risk, right? You need to find the best way of managing the variables. That's very important. So, for example, instead of saying that this is not possible, this is a no, finding the right yes, or saying it's not possible, but we can do it this way.
Yeah.
Maybe look at this instead. Maybe this structure would be more helpful. And it's always a business call also, because at the end of the day, they're commercial units and they have to make a profit and whatever. And business is about risk taking. So again, the balance is very important, that you take the risk, but you don't go crazy. And that sense and that balance comes from your back-end functions, support functions like law and compliance and audit.
Right. And diving deeper into, I think, I had the pleasure of speaking to the CIO of Indus Hospital. And he told me, Mr. Shakil, and he said that it's so important because obviously he had, again, a very diverse portfolio of, hopping from sector to sector. He said that, Dila, you need to get into each and every single process and SOP of the operations, whether it is related to what you do or not, is stepping into an employer and marking a difference would require you to kind of dissolve all the SOPs, whether it's in operation or whether it's in procurement, whether it's in information, whether it is in compliance and legal. You have to know each in the core, and you have to, that is how you seep into the mechanics of how the business is run actually.
Yes, very true.
And then you can identify and do your own gap analysis, so that your expertise, kind of surface in the best way possible. I would take you a little, because this is also very fascinating side of diving deeper into an expert, that had they ever looked at themselves as anybody other than what they are at the moment? If you weren't a lawyer, How did Sarah look at herself then? Also, how have things panned out differently? What would you do differently um, now as opposed to your learning? So how the learnings have kind of shaped you, and secondly, any recommendations that you would have for our students towards any books, any tools, any experience that you would like to share that kind of just changed you as an individual?
What I'd do if I wasn't a lawyer, frankly, I'm not sure. I've been a lawyer for so long,
Yeah.
so I can't imagine being anything else. And even now, I feel that if I was given a purely management role, I'd probably decline it. It has to be, this law ka flavor has to be there. I absolutely love it.
Ever thought of bureaucracy? Ever thought of becoming a bureaucrat?
Well,
Ever thought of...
That's what they keep saying, right?
Yeah.
That you can be a bureaucrat or a
Yeah.
politician because the country was made by lawyers, and we'll always have
certainly,
that.
yes.
So,
And
like,
it complements very beautifully with the field.
maybe policy making.
Okay.
Also, driving change, whether it is anti-harassment and other things that are close to my heart, like unfair compensation. We still have that.
Yeah.
Like women on the top might not be compensated the same way as men. There's still a
Yes.
disparity. There are
Yes.
statistics to prove it. That's infuriating. And so, I
Certainly.
mean, things like that would bring about change in areas that are close to my heart. So it's certainly that, but lawyer for sure,
Okay.
nothing else.
Okay.
And well, your other question was what advice I'd give to...
No, what tools, what resources, any books in particular, any experience that kind of brought the best out of you that you would recommend to the students?
Look,
or
I
the young
believe
professionals?
in research,
Okay.
right? Before you make up your mind or formulate an opinion, you need to just study. There's no I can't stress this enough.
Okay.
Research, read, find whatever tools you like. I don't even care if it's Google research or articles, scholarly articles or newspaper articles. There is so much information out there now with AI, like you said. There's so much information out there. Come prepared to the table. That's what matters. You will not get a chance to come to that table many times. You get one chance for that exposure. If you
Yeah.
get it right,
Yeah.
then that's where your growth starts, your career growth starts. Then the right people start noticing you. So when you get that opportunity, when you get that break, or it's an internship or whatever, then utilize it well. Don't be lazy about it. I don't like lazy attempts, whether it's an assignment or whether it's a presentation. Give it your best shot. And also, please don't be afraid to ask for help. Even if it's your senior, they will value it. If you come back to my room and say, Sarah, you gave me this assignment, here's where I'm stuck. I will value that. That means you want to learn, you want to break that barrier, you want to go beyond that. And I keep, encouraging my associates to do the same. Very important.
What is the ratio of recruits when it comes to men and women, particularly in in-house counsel? And do you think that women bring a different lens to the adaptability and change management when it comes to the legal profession, particularly on this side?
Women are naturally meant to balance everyone's
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
expectations.
Yes.
Like that's how we've been raised. So they do bring that, and they bring empathy, and they bring emotion, and I love that also. They bring that passion to
Yeah.
the table. And even till date, women have not taken for granted the job that they've got, or the assignment they have, or if they've got. They're still working very hard to keep it.
Yeah.
So they are working hard.
Yeah.
And they're very bright. I mean, there's some very bright girls. And like I said, leadership roles should not be gender-based. They should be
Yes.
competence-based. So
competency-based,
equally, boys are equally competent. They have their own skill set. They are more focused, and yes, they're there for the long run. There's no chance that they'll not fall out one day, realize we don't
Yes.
want to study and we don't
Yeah.
want to work. So
Yeah.
they don't have that option.
Yes.
So
yes.
there's consistency.
Right.
That's there also.
It is also perceived that being a lawyer, you're a people's person. You have to be slightly extravagant. You have to be a little enterprising. Otherwise you will not be able to climb up at senior management positions. Now, women and girls of today do kind of like, get nervous, are hesitant to take up such roles, might not be suiting well with their lifestyles. How to kind of like, inject that courage in them? I mean, how to shut those noises, who kind of like, sort of are at times very demeaning um, to their work, to what their competence is, and how to keep up in an atmosphere that is constantly, trying to pull you down.
Like, we need to check that.
You know?
People, I think it's a very responsible role that when
Yes,
you
we-
reach that
yes.
leadership position, you need to check that. You need to call it out. You need to call out the inappropriate comment, the unfavorable shift between a
Yes.
man and a woman, and you need to tell them that it has to be competence based, and the change is there. Sometimes it's a lot of we internalize a lot of negativity also. There's a lot of battles that we have to fight with ourselves, and that no one can help you with. But as far as the external pressures are concerned, we need to ease that for everybody. We need to give everyone a level playing field, the boys and the girls. That you should rise as high as your competence, and there should be nothing stopping you other than your own hard work or lack of it.
So what to do? How to kind of like, and this will be one of my final questions to you, because I do face this a lot. They're constantly fighting their way in, right? Because now at this point there's so much competition. When it comes to their skills, when it comes to their mindset, there's always somebody better out there. There's always somebody better out there. There's also a rush, and this is also going to be one of my very pertinent questions here. Have you witnessed, how do you look at the Gen Z? What would you recommend the Gen Z when it comes to, the do's and not to do's? What are they missing? Where are they falling short in? What are those core elements that they cannot, sort of take along when it comes to them being professionals?
Can I just start off with what I really like about the Gen Zs?
Yes, please do.
Boundaries.
Yes.
They're very good at setting boundaries.
Yes,
and
putting
I
the foot down
like
and-
that.
and yes,
Absolutely.
certainly,
And
I
they
love it
have the
too.
confidence,
They
and
have
I
this-
like that too.
yes.
But they lack the effort and the work that needs to complement that kind of confidence. And that's
Those boundaries actually get carried away.
Yes.
They
Yes.
get carried away with those boundaries. Those boundaries need to have a boundary as well.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
that is what I feel. So when it comes to the very high pressured environment, I think they overanalyze their competence also.
Yes.
They overstate their competence as well. They don't understate it, they overstate it.
Yes.
And money is something, and outcomes apparently, or compensations are something that they ask for in the very first go. How do you look at it? I mean, I agree. Hard work needs to be, compensated. There's no two ways about it.
Yes.
But somebody stepping in as an intern, asking you that very first question, not proving themselves, falling short right after a day or two, or falling, short of their motivation, dreading to come to work, like you mentioned, not driving enough. How to shift, and what is skills and mindset one needs to keep, and especially the young professionals of today, that helps them or will help them eventually sustain in a high pressured work in corporate and legal environment of today, because somebody else will literally chew them off.
That's true.
Right?
That's the
So
problem.
how to keep up?
That's the thing. Actually, they're very good negotiators, I must say that.
Yeah,
and they have
certainly.
that kind of confidence, and that's a skill also. But I think what they lack is, like I say again, dedication. I do feel that a lot of these kids have so much potential if they would just put their minds to it, right?
Yeah.
And if they can be more focused. I think focus is a problem that even I see in my children, like the younger generation, every decade is losing more focus. Maybe it's because of the variation of information and just too much information
Yeah,
and
the
too much
dopamine
to
often,
do.
yeah,
Yes.
the dopamine hikes and lows, constant hikes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so focus is important.
Right.
Everyone needs to focus. And then in the long run, it's not good for us as a country to have like an entire generation of people who want it all but don't want to give it all.
But how to inculcate that focus, Sarah? What do you do? I mean, if I ask you, what have you been doing over the years?
Got constant feedback. Like, if required, daily feedback. What I don't try to do is, what happens is, and it's very easy to do, is that one person brings an assignment, it's not up to the mark, and you have a busy day and you like, just give it to the one who does it best. And it's also unfair to that one who's doing it best, because then they're overworked.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And they're being compensated the same. So the important thing is to ensure that you're able to bring out the best in someone, whether it requires motivation, whether it requires a little bit of, being a little stern also sometimes,
yes,
and
certainly.
telling them the consequences and just giving them those lectures, because I think it's required, right? We're also mentoring them, we're coaching them. So almost like a parent's role.
Yeah.
And I see them as my kids. So it's a lot about trying to give them that direction and give them that perspective that you're great and you can be so much better, but you need to keep the focus.
But not every mentor, again, is going to think like you do, right? At times, they have to learn from tough employers as well.
Yes.
In a world of today, if they have to, like you mentioned, they need to be focused enough, driven enough. Are there any exercises anything that they need to exercise consciously that you can recommend or suggest?
Life,
or to,
my darling,
or
is the biggest exercise.
Or to abstain from, something that they should abstain from in order to enhance their lifestyle that would, kind of like just sort of bring out that kind of focus and clarity for their field?
I think any field, any person, reading, I think conventional reading.
Yeah.
I mean, reading books.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
know?
conventional reading. Very good, yes.
As opposed to just headlines and breaking news and extracts
Variety,
and abstracts.
yes.
So that helps with the focus.
Even
It gives you-
fiction. Even fiction.
Even fiction,
Yes.
absolutely. That's how we started
Yes,
off.
yes.
And so that's there. And like I said, life will teach you.
Yes,
That's Hazrat Ali's quote.
Yes.
It's a complete sentence. Life will teach you.
Yes.
And whether it is through learning through the tough way or the easy way, evolving, or life lessons,
Yes.
you'll get there. I mean,
Yes.
we worry more about this generation. They'll
yes.
get there.
Yes.
They also have that grit.
They have the grit. They have the grit. They have the clarity at a very young age.
Yes.
That's a very powerful advice, Sarah. That life in its way, it's going to kind of like unfold for each one of us.
Yes.
When it comes to my final question, when it comes to Z2C now in particular, we recently also signed an MOU with Child Communications, and we would a lot of my focus goes in the vocational development
Yes.
of the students. Anything that Z2C is doing very constructively in areas of vocational development with the education industry?
I don't know about the education industry. We take a lot of management trainees.
Okay, excellent.
We give them excellent exposure. They're not limited to their assistant managers or managers. If they're good, they are mentored by Rehan himself, the senior team themselves. If they're good enough, they're part of that team. They've given that exposure. It's a great learning.
Is it an annual practice? Are there certain
It's an
training
ongoing.
drills?
It's
Okay,
an ongoing thing. Every year, that's how
Excellent.
they invest in resource.
Lovely.
And I absolutely recommend you sending across your kids,
Yes.
whether for trainings
Sure.
or just internships.
Yes,
It's
certainly.
an amazing environment
Certainly.
for
We
kids.
will definitely be coming over and visiting Z2C and
Please
you
do.
personally in your
You must.
office. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
This is going to go a very long way. And I believe that the students will be taking, especially girls, looking at you, will be taking their notes. And I think some sort of a very strong encouragement and inspiration to reach a certain level or to craft their way, starting off at a young age.
That's very kind of you.
And I
How
think
humbling.
this push is very essential. They need an interface like you to learn from. Thank you so
Thank
much
you
once
so
again.
much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. Whether you are paving your way as a law student or have just been a young professional in the industry, I think listening to particularly women in leadership is very important, especially for the young women lawyers out there. It's very essential for you to understand that the journey is never going to be a linear journey. It is going to be very multidimensional and multi-layered. and you will have to craft your own pathway with a lot of resilience, with a lot of hard work, and most importantly, exposure. So, thank you so much for joining us, and I shall see you in the next episode at Career Talk.